Welcome back. At long last, you've put together enough skills to create a complete game. And so we're going to build that game now. Now, it's looking a little scary, right? No, it isn't. It's not scary at all because we've already done the hard work. We begin with the design document, and we'll review that to make sure we know everything is okay. We know what we're going to do now. It's just a matter of implementing it. We know that we need a certain number of elements on a web page. We're going to write some HTML for that. We know we need them lined up in a particular way. We're going to write CSS for that. And finally, we know what should happen. And so we know we're going to write some JavaScript for that. So you don't write code without some sort of a design document. But once you do have that design document, okay, we're ready to party. And that's where we are. We are ready to party. So let's go ahead and start building this program. We'll begin by looking at the HTML. Now the HTML is relatively simplistic because I want to separate everything out. You can see it has the components we were talking about. And what I've done is I have separated out the CSS into an external file and the JavaScript. So right now all I really am thinking about is the HTML. And in the HTML, once again, I'm not that worried about exactly the layout. I just want to make sure I have the right general things in the right order and that I've named everything properly. So I do have a body. I will be calling it an init, so I'll go ahead and put it there. Most games have an initialization function. Then I have my div. As you recall, the div begins with some instructions, so I've got that as a starting place. And now I've got some labels, input elements. I know the name of everything because it was already on my diagram. I know what buttons I need. I know this one doesn't need a name, but it should call a check-guess function. I know this one does need a name because I'll be referring to it in code. And it will also call the init function. No guessing. I look at my diagram. I know everything that I need to have. So the page itself is very straightforward because I really am not doing a lot of creative thinking here. I am simply implementing my diagram. The CSS is likewise pretty straightforward because it's simply a matter of making this HTML look as I wish. And if you look at this, you'll see essentially it is very much like the form CSS that we used way back in the Word story. So I haven't really changed much since then. You can look this over, but there's nothing real difficult about the CSS. The interesting part, of course, is the JavaScript code, and that's what we'll look at next. Of course, the interesting part of any game is the interaction, so it wouldn't surprise you that the JavaScript code would be particularly interesting. So now we want to think about which kinds of variables we have. The key to any program is really the data. And so we have a couple of types of variables we're interested in. First of all, here are the global variables we're interested in. We want these variables to be at the page level. Remember I said that some variables are at the page level when they're shared between functions. And that's true, but there's a special case here where guess is mainly used in the check guess button. Alright, cool, but here's the thing. The guess and the correct, they will be used in multiple passes of the same function. So they can't just be created and destroyed every time we go into functions. Those belong to the whole page, not to particular functions. So as I'm thinking about variables, I try to put functions in or variables inside functions whenever possible, but a few variables will belong to the entire document. You don't want to do too many because they're hard to keep track of. But guess, correct, and turns, these are the variables that are key to my entire program. I think every function will need access to them. It's pretty common for me to make components page-level variables as well, so that I will be able to refer to any part of the page in any of the functions. Okay, that's good. Now, init, we don't have to guess. We know what init does. For one thing, it told us. Another thing is that initialization functions are usually pretty much the same. Take all of your key variables, give them initial starting values. If you have components, make variables for them. Okay, well that makes sense. So here I am initializing the various components. Got that. That's easy enough. And then I'm going to do a couple of other interesting things. Now, button again is that button that says play again. That only makes sense if we've just won a game, correct? Yes. So here's what I'm going to do. It turns out that button again has a style property which has a display property. And if I set that to none, that makes the button disappear. It's still there, but it's not visible. Oh, that's so cool. Yes, it is so cool. So we can make things appear and disappear on the page by setting their display to none. So for now, I'll make it disappear, so the user won't see it yet. Now I'll look at my other variables and see what sort of initialization has to happen there. We'll set turns to 0. We'll set the initial output to something pretty here. I'm thinking of a number between 0 and 100. You may be wondering, if I did that in HTML, why do that again in code? Well, hang on. I'll show you in just a moment. The other thing we need to do when we initialize the game is generate a random number for the correct answer. Okay, parseInt math dot random times 100. Okay, that's good. And then this is a really sneaky line. Console.log correct. What does that do? Well, I'll show you. It's something very, very sneaky. There's a part of the debugging system that allows us to write stuff in it. And so as we test this program, I'll show it to you. Okay, then we're going to make sure the input text gets the focus. That doesn't work on every browser, but it's a handy little feature. That way, if they start typing something in, it'll get typed into that txt guess. Oh, that's neat. All right, so that's what the init does. Now, why would I reinitialize the output? Well, the output will change during gameplay, and init is called when the program first initializes, but it's also called when they click the restart button. Aha. So we can call a function from more than one place. Oh, neat. Okay, check guess. This is the key to the whole game. This is the one that says, all right, they must have typed something in. I already have a correct answer. I'm going to compare the user's guess to correct. Okay, so what are we going to do? First thing we're going to do is increment the number of turns. Okay, so add 1 to the number of turns because a turn has just occurred. Now we'll create some text. Response gets turns plus a little parenthesis thing. Now we'll go get the guess from the user. So we're saying txtguess.value. So that's that text box. Go get the value of it. ParseInt says, hey, convert that to an integer. Okay, I'm good. Now I'm going to take that integer, copy it over to this variable guess. So I have correct, which is the randomly generated integer. I have guess, that is the user-generated integer. Now I just do some comparisons. If guess is less than correct, I'll add to the response, hey, too low. Else, if guess is greater than correct, the response I'll add, too high. If guess is equal to correct, I'll tell them it's correct. One more thing I'll do if guess is equal to correct is I will show that button again. So button again .style.display gets block. Setting the display to block makes it visible. Remember I said it's display to none before. So it will become visible again. Oh, that's pretty cool. And then finally, if it's something else, so guess should have been higher than correct or lower than correct or equal to correct, but if something strange happened, then we'll give an emergency response, hey, that needs to be a number between 1 and 100. Okay, I'm getting that. And then finally what we'll do with all this response is that we'll copy it over to output. Believe it or not, this is all there is to the game, these two functions. Now this could be really shocking to you if you have tried to write this kind of program in a different language, say C++ or Java or Python or something, because this is the kind of program that computer science teachers love to give. And you may have written in a totally different way with lots of loops and everything. Well, where's my loop? There's no loop here. Right. This is a beautiful thing about game programming, is that we tend to utilize a larger loop. In this case, I'm using the loop built into the browser itself. So I don't actually have to write a loop. I simply use the nature of the web itself as my main loop. So it's just sitting there waiting for me. It's running. Right now, neither of my functions is running, but as soon as I type something in, it's still sitting there. When I click the check your guess, well, then it goes and it runs that check answer function. Now, for testing purposes, it sure would be nice to know what the right answer is. Well, once again, we love our debugging console. When I hit F12 in Chrome to look at the console, and then click on the console tab, you'll see here that it printed a 23. You remember that console.log? Here's something really, really sneaky that I did. I went ahead and wrote out to this console what the right answer was. Most users won't know that's there. This is really handy so I can test it. And this is a really useful skill of a programmer, is being able to test. I'm not surprised 50 is too high, because the right answer is 23. Let's go with something we know is too low. It says it's too low. Now we'll do the right answer, 23, and there you go. It's correct. So that's really, really sly what I just did there. I wrote to the console. Now, why would you do that? Normally in a finished game, I'm not going to leave answers just laying around for the user to pick up. But a lot of times when I'm writing programs, especially games, things are going to get out of control. So if I want to figure out what's going on, I can use these console.log tricks to figure out what's happening in my variables. And that's a really, really useful thing to be able to do. All right. Well, this is great. You know what you should do now, right? Make a game. Make your own game. Make a game that involves some random numbers, maybe some user input. Maybe you could do a simple combat game, or you could do some sort of a simple game with dice, or you could do something with some random numbers. There's lots of fun things you can do with that. So make that, and then we'll come back and we'll integrate a game engine so we can start having graphics that move around on the page. You ready for that? Yes, I know you are. All right, I will see you then.